Okay, I'm alive.
Hi.
Okay, so welcome everyone. No, I don't think anyone's here just yet, but welcome everyone to the SEN workshop. My name is Ria and I am the founder of Black Teachers Connect. So thank you very much for joining us today. We are absolutely so thankful that we have the amazing Antoinette who has stepped onto our platform today to give you a workshop on how to best support SEN students in the classroom. It's something I mentioned in the NQT and trainee webinar about something that I struggle with myself in regard to differentiation, and something that you definitely need support with as a teacher, and you can always learn more. So without further ado, I'm going to allow Antoinette to introduce herself. Once she's done that, I'm going to run off and the floor will be hers. So Antoinette, please just introduce yourself and give people an idea of who you are.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Antoinette Boyamba. I am a teacher of English and Deputy Senko at an all-girls academy in Bermondsey. I am a passionate advocate for inclusive education, hence why I stepped into the role as Deputy Senko. I'm all about trying to create a culture whereby my students aren't afraid to make mistakes. So I'm hoping that after today's workshop, you're able to go away with some tangible strategies that you can employ in your teaching practice from September onwards.
Okay, so the floor is hers, guys. It's lovely. I'll be back for the Q&A. So I'm going to step off now, bring up the PowerPoint, and Antoinette, the floor will be yours. So
thank you. Okay, so as I've already said, hello, my name is Antoinette. I'm really sorry about the noise. I don't know what's going, electric scooters, I think. But right, so as I was already saying, you know, I'm an advocate for inclusive education, and I'm all about creating a culture where my students aren't afraid to get things wrong. I think when I reminisce on my schooling experience, it was really embarrassing when I got the answer wrong. And this is something that I really don't encourage within my own classroom. Ria, if you could get the PowerPoint up for me, please. I can't see it.
hold on, I've come back. Can anyone see the PowerPoint? Is it not showing?
No, hold on
a second.
There we go.
Let me.
So I've got a quote here from Thomas Edison, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this individual. So he was a famous American inventor, and he says that our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. Now, this is a quote I often introduce to realize my students with at the beginning of each academic year, so that they know when they step into my classroom, you might not always get it right, but Lord knows you're definitely going to keep on trying and we will get there at some point. Now, in my training year, I worked for the academy and I taught a group of students who were taking out mainstream education because they couldn't access the curriculum. And that is one thing that kind of motivated me to start investigating what SEN actually is, what that looks like, and how I can improve my teaching so I can best support those students. Now, having taught those,
I've come back. The sound. People are saying the sound. They can't hear the sound. What's wrong with the sound? I don't think there's any.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hold on a second. Let me remove myself. And
let me close the window. 1 second.
sorry, guys. Technical difficulties, but you know, it's life. I'm trying with the sound. Sorry. I'm trying with the sound. I want you guys to have the best experience. So just give me a second. Hold on. Okay, let me see if it's the PowerPoint that's causing the sound issues. If it is, Antoinette, maybe what we'll just have to say is do you have your PowerPoint up separately, and then we'll send it out after.
Okay, so
let me add the PowerPoint again. If I add it again and it's still causing issues with the sound, we'll see. Okay. One
All right.
second.
Okay. Okay, so do you want to put it in the PowerPoint view mode? Great. So as I was saying, I taught a group of individuals who were taken out of mainstream education, and that's one thing that kind of reinforced my desire to want to go into SEN specifically. Now, one thing that I really, really did learn from teaching that group is that all of my students, I want them to reach a specific endpoint, but the journey and getting there, sometimes we need to take a bit of a detour, but ultimately, absolutely everybody in my classroom is going to reach that end goal. So for example, if by the end of the lesson, I'd like my group to write an analytical paragraph, it might be a bit different in set one, for example, where I've got high achievers in comparison to another set where I've got SEN students, but at the end of the lesson, everyone is writing that paragraph. Now, the quality may differ, but again, it's just ensuring that all of the students are able to achieve exactly the same thing, irrespective of whether they have learning needs or not. Next slide, please. So before we begin, I thought that it would be best for us to actually define what SEND is, because this is a phrase that is used quite often within the school setting, and I'm not entirely sure whether everybody is familiar with the correct definition. So I've taken this from the Code of Practice, and the link is just at the bottom there. So the definition of SEND: a child or young person has SEND if they have a learning difficulty or disability which calls for special educational provision to be made for him or her. A child of compulsory school age or a young person has a learning difficulty if her or him has a significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of others of the same age, or has a disability which prevents him or her from making use of facilities of a kind generally provided for others of the same age in mainstream schools. So if I had to just kind of summarize that in layman's terms, it would just be an individual that has SEND. Things are just a little bit more challenging for that person, but it does not mean that they don't have the capability and the capacity to succeed in the same way that non-SEN learners are able to succeed. Now, this is where things might get a little bit complex, so bear with me as I try to explain. Next slide, please. Now, there are 4 broad areas of SEND. As you can see, they're listed there. So we've got communication and interaction, we've got cognition and learning, social, emotional, and mental health, and then sensory and or physical needs. Now, according to the last year's SEND report released by the DFE in January 2019, students with SEND, or the number of students with SEND, has actually increased for the 3rd consecutive year. So the most common types of needs in 2019 were communication and interaction. So those would be speech, language, and communication needs, and the autistic spectrum disorder. Next slide for me, please. Thank you. So this is an indication that there is definitely work to be done to support such like individuals. Now, in order for us to just kind of to be able to decipher what exactly they need and what support they need, let's have a look at how they may present within the classroom. So children and young people with speech, language, and communication needs have difficulty in communicating with others. So this may be because they have difficulty saying what they want to, understanding what is being said to them, or that they do not understand or use social rules of communication. And sometimes similar with ASD students, whereas they have particular difficulties with social interaction. So they may experience difficulties with language, communication, and imagination, which is why it's super important that when we are engaging with such like students, that we're being extremely specific. And I think within the English language, we can often use idioms. And I know for myself, I can be a sarcastic person at times, but that doesn't work when working with autistic students, because they take things quite literally. So on the right hand side, I've got behaviours that might be presented within the classroom. So if a student's got SLCN, they'll have difficulties with speech or meeting the language demands of the class, such as following instructions. They may use words incorrectly, so they may trip over their tongue. They may have reduced vocabulary and may find it difficult to recall words or express ideas. So this doesn't mean that they don't have the ideas, but they just find it quite challenging to sort of put everything in a cohesive way for us to comprehend at times. A student that is autistic would have difficulty in understanding verbal and non-verbal communication and thinking flexibly. So when routines are changed, that can prove to be quite challenging for some autistic students. So if we think about lockdown and having to actually complete schoolwork from home, no longer having that routine where they'd get up, make their way to school, etc. They know when it's tutor time, what their lessons will be. That throws them into a chaos at times, and it can be difficult for them to sort of manage that. And they can also demonstrate obsessive or withdrawn behaviours. Next slide, please. Now, the whole point of this is for you guys to learn ways to best support SEN students. And honestly, I can only encourage you to really have a look at the SEN code of practice. I've got a breakdown of some key points that I'm going to send around to everyone that's joined in to the workshop today for further clarification. But here is a snippet of what I believe to be the most important thing. So according to the SEN code of practice, all teachers must have a clear understanding of the needs of all pupils, including those with SEN. For every teacher, it is an integral part of planning and teaching effectively. The SEN provision is underpinned by high quality teaching and is compromised by anything else. SEN affects all staff, so the code of practice places a strong focus on progress and embedding a culture of high expectations for all. So according to the SEN code of practice, thank you, the onus is on us as the classroom expert, the boss of that classroom. You need to know the needs of your SEN learners so that you're able to plan lessons that are accessible for them. So you want to be able to plan lessons that provide support and also simultaneously challenge them too. So it's not the idea that because I've got SEN students, you know, this has to be easy. Not at all. It needs to be accessible, but it doesn't mean that we can't also push them further too. And that is why it's crucial to have high expectations of our students. And if we don't, ultimately, I'd say that we'd even be robbing them of the education that they are worthy of receiving. Now, the second point says that the SEN provision is underpinned by high quality teaching and is compromised by anything less. So again, just to reiterate my initial point, it has to be a good level of teaching that we're providing for these students, because if we are not, we are robbing them of what they are deserving of. Next slide, please. So I think this calls for, just a second, Ria, thanks. This calls for self-reflection, and it can be hard to reflect at times. And obviously I can't hear you guys, so I'm going to do a bit of reflecting based on some of the questions that I will put on the PowerPoint slide in a moment. Now, when I'm thinking about my SEN students, or when I'm thinking about SEND across the academy that I work at, these are some of the questions that come to mind. So are there any literacy needs creating a barrier for learning and reduced engagement? Now, thinking about lockdown, many of the students that were in my academy, some of the SEND students weren't able to access the work. And so that made me think to myself, when I was planning my lessons and planning work for them to complete, am I aware of their reading ages? Maybe it, out of convenience, it can just be easier to give them a piece of text and some questions to answer. But, you know, have I got a glossary in there for them to understand? Because if their reading ages are different from their counterparts in the classroom, then the work that I'm setting, it won't it won't be accessible to them and they won't be able to engage in that work. So something that we need to have a look at is their literacy needs. I don't know whether that data is accessible for you guys, but often you can find that depending on what you use. You've got Sims and Bromcom, or you can speak to your English department or your librarian if you have one, and they'll be able to give you the reading ages of students, and hopefully that can support you with devising things that are accessible for them. Next question. Do we expect less of our SEND learners? It's a question that I think we need to continue asking ourselves. Is it because, this student has X, we don't think that they can do Y? That's something that I believe needs to be stripped away from anyone. And sometimes it can even be in our subconscious where, you might be a bit reluctant to give that student that work because, I'm not too sure whether they can manage it. Why don't we give them the tools to support them so that they're able to successfully do what we think maybe they can't do? Because again, as I've already said, students can do anything. Their capacity is a lot wider than we think it is. And sometimes, unfortunately, we as teachers, when we think we have their best interest at heart, sometimes we don't always, and we don't give them the chance to actually engage in work that they could be doing because we think, it'll be easier for them to do something like this. So I'd say we need to ensure that we're challenging our students. Next question. Have positives been communicated to parents and carers? This is something that at the beginning of this academic year, pre-lockdown, and even post-lockdown, if I'm completely honest with you, if I saw that a SEN student was engaging in the work that I set on Teams and completing work to a really high standard, I'm calling home and I'm going to let your mum, dad, whoever you live with know that you're doing a really, really good job. And I think it's important for us to kind of think about the ways in which we measure success. So for a high ability student or high prior attaining student, should I say, it may be easier for them to complete some work, but for that SEN student, it took everything in them to get that. And I know with one of my students, I often set a weekly recall quiz, so they'll have 10 questions to answer, and every week this particular student who has ASD would only get maybe 2 or 3 out of 10, but over the weeks she started to improve, so it was no longer 3 out of 10, she got 4 out of 10, she got 5 out of 10. I think the highest she got was a 6 out of 10, whereas with my high prior attainers they were just getting 10s. But I know that 6 for that student meant so much, so it was my duty for me to communicate that to her mum so that she knows, although my daughter does have a SEN need, it doesn't mean that she isn't succeeding, just like non-SEN learners in the classroom too. Next question. Has learning been scaffolded and supported so the child can succeed? Later on, I'll be providing you guys with some tangible strategies, as I've already said, and breaking down tasks to demonstrate how exactly you can scaffold and support students. Because if you just give them a lump of something to do and leave them to their own devices, often even in a classroom setting, you'll see that can sometimes lead to misbehavior, that can lead to them just being completely disengaged with you and your subject. And it can become a behavior incident, when a lot of behavior incidents actually stem from a lack of comprehension. So what can we do to ensure that the child knows what they're doing before they go off and complete that task independently? Next question, please. Is the curriculum accessible? Now, with a lot of the changes that have taken place, I think there's been a strong drive for ensuring that the curriculums that we are teaching are challenging and they're rigorous and they're rich, which I think is excellent. But they should also simultaneously be accessible as well. So in no way am I saying that if the curriculum is challenging, it can't be accessible, which means that SEN students need to opt for something else. That's not the point, because again, that would be robbing them of what the SEN Code of Practice alluded to. And we need that high quality teaching. So what can we do to make sure that the curriculum that we are teaching those SEN students is a bit more palatable and how can they digest this? So again, remember, we want the goal to be the same as non-SEN learners, but the journey is going to be a little bit different. So what are we doing to tweak that journey to ensure the students get to the final destination? Next question. And this is the most important question, I believe. Do we know our SEND learners? Now, again, I remember in my training year, it's a lot. I went into teaching straight after completing my undergrad, and then I did my postgrad, and I went down the schools direct route, and literally first day of September, you've got a class, and it can be really, really overwhelming. And for me, it was just, I'm just trying to write the date in a straight line. I'm just trying to write the date in a straight line. I'm trying to remember all of the kids' names. I'm trying to get my printing ready, but do I know who those SEN learners are? Do I know who those low prior attainers are? So again, if wherever you are in your teaching journey, I mean, you got to get that pen and paper, and you've got to be writing down on your seating plan, such and such has this, and I know that X works for them in this lesson. It's really, really important. If we don't know who our SEN learners are, then literally, as gruesome as it sounds, there's just no point. So really, really, really important that we know who our SEN learners are, what makes them SEN, like what SEN need do they have, and then we're able to think about how we can subsequently support them so that they are accessing our lessons. Now, I think the best way for you guys to sort of build on what you already know, because I'm sure you've heard a lot of these things before, is by having examples of what quality first SEN teaching looks like. Now, I think that phrase in itself is problematic as such, because quality first teaching, whether it's SEND or non-SEND, is quality first teaching. So what can we do to ensure that our SEN learners are accessing our subjects? Now, I'm going to start in my comfort zone. I'll start with English, and you'll see some examples of what I've done, and then we'll go through some other subjects too. So if you press it once for me, Ria. Yeah, thank you. Go back. Thank you. So examples in English. Now, bear in mind, sorry guys, just a disclaimer, this isn't the updated PowerPoint, so I'm just trying to figure out where I am. I know where we are now, but again, I'll send the updated PowerPoint round to you guys with some additional things too. So on the right hand side, well, before that, my year 7 students were studying the poem Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. Now, I don't know if we've got any poetry enthusiasts out there or my fellow English teachers, but Still I Rise essentially is a poem that is all about overcoming pain, being resilient, rising up. And on the right-hand side, I have a list of themes that I got from my friend Jade. And this is what I had presented to my high prior attainers. So you've got a list of these themes and which themes link to Still I Rise. Now, I knew that my SEN learners weren't going to be able to access this. And even though I want you to just remember that this was, I think, the penultimate lesson before they were given a writing task, we had already been discussing the key themes, but unfortunately, due to cognitive overload and a number of things, depending on their learning need as well, sometimes the students just honestly don't remember. And I know it can be a bit frustrating. So we went over this yesterday, or we just went over this, like, what's the key theme? And they'll say something like, I don't know, potato. And you think, oh, no, it's not potato, it's passion. But right. My high prior attainers were able to figure out which was the key themes, but I knew that my low prior attainers and my SEN learners would find things a bit more challenging, which is why I've got what is presented to you on the left-hand side. So I've got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 themes that I put there. And first, their do now was to define those terms. So for example, we've got adversity, we've got power there, and they were thinking about ways in which these themes could potentially link to Still I Rise. And by having them actually look in the dictionary and get this definition for themselves, I think it was building up that confidence that I needed them to have before we completed the writing task. So when the students were able to define those key terms, they were able to see, oh, you know what, actually, this theme, it doesn't really link to Still I Rise, because if I look back in my exercise book, we haven't really spoken much about adversity, or we haven't really spoken much about power, but we have spoken about the fact that Maya Angelou is really resilient. So if you see at the bottom, both groups have got sentence stems to support them in writing a short paragraph on the key theme that they think is most applicable to the poem. Now, when I saw that the students were performed really, really well, I thought about another poem that I think they would enjoy, which is why I went for Agar's Checking Out My History. This is a poem that is really, really hot on the press at the minute as well, when we're thinking about diversifying the curriculum. So Checking Out My History is actually a GCSE poem. And I remember I taught this poem, I think it was in my NQT year, as I just wanted to try it with year 7, and the person that was observing me had said, Antoinette, this is quite bold, this is your last observation, and you're doing a GCSE poem with year 7. I said, yeah, 100%, absolutely, because I know my girls can do it. So let me show you what my girls did. Next slide for me, please. Now, I don't know if this is clear for you guys to read, but I'm going to go through it and explain what they were able to do. Now, with Checking Out My History, John Agard is frustrated at the fact that the curriculum is Eurocentric and that the curriculum sort of doesn't explore Black historical figures. He feels like he's an outcast, and that the Black experience is quite difficult, which is why he writes this poem phonetically as well. Now, I kid you not, at the end of the lesson, my students then went to history, and their history teacher was saying, you know, Antoinette, what were you going through with them in English? Because they keep telling me that the history curriculum is just Eurocentric. Now, these were things and words, keywords that high prior attainers and SEN learners were using. Now, I mean, my SEN learners, not all of them spelt Eurocentric correctly, but they were using that high level vocabulary because I pitched it high to them and I gave them the tools to be able to access this work. Now, the first example is of a high prior attainer. I'm just going to give a little read of what she wrote. Got it here. So the most significant theme in Checking Out My History is power. The poem discusses how the British government have erased diversity from the history curriculum. Since Agard was a student in Guyana, he was taught a Eurocentric version of history, and the repetition of them tell me what them want to tell me shows his righteous anger at the miseducation of history, etc., etc. Now, my SEN learner was able to write something like this. So, let me read it on here. The most significant theme of Checking Out My History by John Agard is power. Power can be used to control people. And she also talks about the fact that the curriculum is Eurocentric, the fact that it lacks diversity. And again, these were just key ideas, key terms that I really, really drilled into both groups of year 7s, which is why I've got a high prior attainer and a SEN student saying exactly the same thing. So I wonder if I had presented these 2 paragraphs to you without knowing who the students were, without knowing whether they were SEN learners or not, like, would we even think that they were SEN learners? Sometimes having that label, again, can sort of, I would say, don't know what word to use. You know what I mean? It can kind of make us have a preconceived idea on their capabilities and what they can do, when, again, I think they can do anything if we just give them the tools to best support them. Now, let's move on and see how we're able to successfully support SEN learners in other subjects. So we've got an example in MFL, got an example in French. Now, the first task is the students need to translate the phrases in English into French, obviously. So if we have a look at number 1, it says, yesterday morning, I contacted my friend Yasmin. So if we look at in the box there, we've got yesterday, so yeah is already there. We've got the beginning of the word morning, so that would be matin. We've got I, so yeah, matin. J'ai contacté mon ami Yasmin. So the students are expected to fill in the gap. But if you see, it progressively sort of hardens as well, becomes a bit more challenging, because by the end of the lesson, or by the end of that task, they're expected to translate another 4 terms, but they don't have the fill in the blanks. So this is something that they're able to do independently. Now, they would have already used some of that vocabulary in the first part of that task, which would have meant that when they have to go off and complete the challenge task by themselves, you don't have the support of the teacher anymore, and you have to do it by yourself. And that's because they've been told how to structure the sentence. They've worked on verbally saying the sentence out loud as well. They've worked with members of their table to go through that work beforehand. And so the teacher has provided them with sufficient tools for them to be able to complete that task by themselves. So again, yes, of course, we need to ensure that we are ensure that we're supporting our students, but are we also simultaneously challenging them too? So it's about learning when exactly we're going to sort of reduce the challenge that is provided, so that they're able to go from being the novice to the expert. So let's have a look at another couple of examples in science. Right, so science isn't my strongest, it's not my strong point, but I was able to understand this. So year 7, we're able to understand it too. Now, the example in science, section 1, and might I add, this was actually after supporting this training, we went through some ways in which to support this group, because we both taught the same nurture group, and the group there is made up of quite a lot of students that are SEN. So this is what this teacher was able to create during lockdown, and it was a huge success. I shared it with my academy as well. So section 1, it says, first show this video. So the video that they had to watch described many of the nutrients that we need in our food. So they've got that visual aid to begin with, as opposed to them just getting straight into the nitty-gritty. They've got an idea of what this looks like. They've got that visualization there beforehand, and then they're expected to read through and see the definition of a nutrient. Now, that nutrient definition was included in the video as well, but to sort of solidify that for them, they've got the definition on the sheet as well. So nutrient is a substance needed by organisms to stay alive and healthy, etc. So we've got the list of different nutrients as well. Now it gets better. Next slide, please. They had a closer look at nutrients. Again, they've got a visual aid. So they started with carbohydrates. What do carbohydrates do? They give us energy, etc. And then we've got some images of some good old carbs, and some examples too. We've also got fats and oils. They're also known as liquids. They help to store energy in the body, etc. So this teacher went through all of the nutrients. She had images of all of the nutrients. She had the definition of all of the nutrients, even though this was also included in the video that the students had to watch at the beginning of the task. She includes this too, because repetition for emphasis is super, super important for all learners, not just SEN learners. So in doing that and having that repetition, it sort of begins to drill this into their head, so they know, okay, this is what it means, and this is what it looks like. And now let's see what they were instructed to do. So they had a recall question. So based on section 1, we got the video, got the images, we got the definitions. What can you remember? So for example, one, which foods have a lot of fiber in, based on their prior learning, what they had just gone through, that video, etc. They would be able to answer those recall questions, and the teacher expected them to answer these questions from memory. And this was something that the students were able to do. So they had those 10 recall questions to drill in their knowledge and consolidate that. After they were asked to mark their answers, so they're self-regulating, they're monitoring their work and self-assessing what they're able to do. And then they've got another task where they fill in the blanks. So again, based on what they've gone through, and then again, just to ensure the students actually know what these nutrients look like. The teacher had a list of various foods, and the students had to list or label which nutrient is found in the image. So that would have again consolidated all of the prior learning that they were exposed to, so that they were able to reach that end goal. Now, in comparison to the way in which that teacher might have taught the topic of nutrients to a high prior attainer, I don't necessarily think perhaps she would have had the fill in the blanks. Maybe there would not have been as much repetition as with the SEN students, but ultimately at the end of that topic, I would hope that both groups of students, so SEN learners and non-SEN learners, know what nutrients are, know about the food groups, etc., and feel confident in that. And so again, it's just the idea of you want the students to achieve the same goal, but the journey and getting there can be a bit different. But again, the goal remains the same. So we've gone through some key examples from English, from MFL, and from science. And I've got some takeaway points for you, and it's not an exhaustive list, but it's 5 points that I think is really, really important for all of you, no matter where you are in your teaching journey, to know, so that you come up and you show up for your students, and they learn and understand what is going on within your classroom. So number one is get to know your SEN learners and how they learn. Now, I have a quote that I've taken from a head of department, and this is what he said. He said, "We get to know every learner here, and not just their name, but what they like doing, what they struggle with, how they want to be helped, what football team they support, and what's going on at home." So getting to know your SEN learners is a lot more than knowing that Ria has ASD. It's about knowing that, you know what, Ria loves history, so I'm going to play on that. If there's an opportunity for me to, I don't know, include a sort of monarch or talk about history in my lesson, I'm going to ask Ria, because Ria is confident in that area, and that is where Ria shines. Now, at my academy, to support teachers, we have student information sheets. So I've taken a snippet, like a screenshot of what these look like. Now, the first section is how I learn best. So all of the students are sort of, they meet up with, they have a meeting with the TA that's linked to their year group, and they go through. So we give them like some stock phrases to choose from. But here, I know this SEN student says that I like to be seated at the front of the classroom. I like clear explanations and instructions. Please explain tasks slowly. I get frustrated when I get work wrong. Please check I understand the task. Now, if you were to get to know your SEN students and you knew how they learn, then I would question, then when that student gets frustrated, is it automatically get out of my classroom, or is it let me sit down and actually get to the root of this problem? Because their behaviors that they're presenting is actually as a result of their frustration and not being able to access the work that we've set them. Now, in addition to the student information sheets, we also have strategies for each teacher to employ in their teaching practice. So with this student, she has receptive language difficulties. So on the right-hand side, there's a list of things that teachers should try to incorporate in their teaching practice to support their students. So they should speak slowly and break information into small, manageable chunks. they should provide the student with a question before she listens to the information and allow her to listen for specific information that is relevant. You can also repeat key information. The fact that this student has, if I go to the third bit, she's got literacy difficulties, which means that her processing speed is different from that of her counterparts. So she needs extra time. Now, I know this student that I'm referring to is ASD, and she needs a bit more time to go through the work. So I know for myself, if I actually, when I plan my lessons, I plan the lesson exactly the same for her, because even though she has ASD, or with her ASD, should I say, she's actually the top of my class. So I perhaps went into teaching them thinking that perhaps this, she might find things a bit more challenging, but it's not the case. It's just it takes her a bit longer than everyone else to do the work. So I'm going to actually have all the explanation written down for you, and you know that you need to complete task 1 to 10. And by the time I get to you in 10 minutes, you should be on task 3. And she might be on task 2 by the time I check in with her, but she's completing that work, and she's doing that because I've learned how she learns. And so I'm able to sort of adjust my methods so that I can meet her halfway and that she can achieve goals for that lesson. So takeaway point number 2 is, oh no, wait, actually, go back. Sorry. All right, so this is a personalized learning plan. This is something that we've just recently introduced at my academy, where again, the TAs would go and meet with the students, and they'd go through this with them. I don't have the stock phrases in there, but I can send this round to anybody that would like to perhaps do this for their own classes. So the first question is, what is it about me you need to know? So my SEN need is, this means to you, my need may look like, etc. So the box there says how I communicate, what I can do by myself, how best to support me, what's important to me, and additional comments. So my students are, and I'm sure your students are too, my students are very vocal. They're very opinionated. So one of my students that I went through this with, her learning need was that she has slow processing, and she has speech and language and communication needs. And she said, like, what I can do by myself, miss, I can read by myself. So don't feel like you can't choose me to read. I just might stutter and I might not feel as confident. So if I get frustrated, just bear with me, because I'll get my ruler out and then I'll keep going. Now, that might not be the same sentiments that another student will echo, but some of these students, if you actually speak to them, they know what they can do by themselves, and they know how they think they know how they'd like you to support them. So if we kind of sort of turn the volume up on the students and student voice, then that can help us to best support those that we teach too. Next. Right, so there's me sorting out my display. I think this was in my NQT year. Boy, this display took a very long time, but I was really, really happy with it. And it was all about changing your mindset, which is why I think point number 2 is really important. So have high aspirations for every student, and promote a growth mindset culture in your classroom. So this is something that I said, all of my students know I believe in them and I show up for them every single day. I purposefully normalize making mistakes. Now, with my students, they already know that Miss, as strict, as firm as I can be, it's absolutely all love. And in this classroom, I tell them on the first day that they have me, we're a family, and you know what, family, we rub each other up the wrong way sometimes. And I might say something that you don't like and vice versa, but at the end of the day, you're going to stomp your feet and it's love. Yeah. So when you come in here, you need to know that we're going to try and we're going to keep going, and you might not always get it right, but you need to keep going. So this is something that my students will look around the classroom and they might look out the window, and I'm like, listen, Beyonce's not on the roof, so you better turn around and look at the display. And the display says, I give up. So the solution is, I will use some of the strategies I've learned. Or they might say things like, I'm not good at this, so what am I missing? I made a mistake. Mistakes help me improve. So having these phrases around the classroom, I hope to motivate the students and get them to know that it's okay if you get things wrong, because I'm going to help you get it right. I'm going to give you the tools that you need, and we're going to move forward. And again, we might fall, but we're going to pick ourselves up and we're going to try again, because failing is not an option. And so if I say that, I genuinely believe that all of my students can achieve. That means that all of my students, I hope, feel like they are grade 9 students. All of you can get a grade 9. Everyone can get one. It's about believing that you can. And then when we work on that belief, I give you what you need to do so that you're able to get the best that you can get. Now, grade 9 might not be within everybody's grasp, and that is okay as well. But maybe your target is a 4. And because we've got this growth mindset, you end up getting a 6. If we didn't have that, maybe you would have capped yourself. So I think it's about really, really motivating students and pushing them so that they know that it's within their capacity to succeed. And success isn't just something that's attributed to set 1 per se. Next one, please. Effective questioning. So I've got a Chinese proverb there. He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger. So having effective questioning, you need to ask the students how they got to that point and ask them to explain their thought processes, because simply asking a student to do a task is not the same as understanding. So an effective teaching strategy is to ask them how they're going to go about that task. And that's when we're able to discover any errors and discover any misconceptions that they have. So, for example, there might be a really crucial step that they've missed out on, and it's only through asking effective questions that we're able to decipher that. And there have been many moments in my classroom where going through the work, and I genuinely think the kids are doing it, and they're going and they're writing and look at their book when they go home, and I'm like, what was going on? What was going on? And it's because maybe I overestimated my ability to explain. So the next lesson, I'd say, guys, I told you that we're family. Why don't you tell me? And then we'll go through everything. And ultimately, it's about having an ethos of empowerment that enables the students to take control of their own learning and develop skills to become independent. And in them becoming independent, it means that the shift goes from novice to expert. So before you know it, the students will be helping somebody that sat next to them that isn't quite understanding what they're doing, because they've successfully been able to answer questions. Now, I think it's really, 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 really important that we're using our students as resources, because they know what's going on, because we're there and we're helping them. Now, it's only when that student has developed that understanding and that knowledge that I would encourage that student to, can you go around and help such and such, because you did a really good answer there. And that is building their confidence, and that is really, really what it's all about. I'd say it's about teaching them that they too can be iron and sharpen one another, and it isn't just me doing all of the work. Next, please. The best CPD is down the corridor. Now, at my academy, this is what a head of faculty said. We have an open door policy and love learning from one another. We sometimes form teacher triads. This has helped me to become reflective in my teaching practice. Guys, the best CPD, honestly, and I stand by this, can just be down the corridor. I know in my free periods, I am forever popping into people's lessons and observing, because I don't feel like I know everything. And if we did know everything, life would be boring. And there's always more to learn. And sometimes I guess we forget that the best resources can be our team. And I just don't mean our departments. I mean the wider network, the wider school. For that nurture group that I teach that has many SEN students, I was collaborating with a science teacher, because she found that there were some things that I was doing that was working well with them, and I found that there were things that she was doing, and we were able to form a connection over that and support each other, because Ria finds it really hard to do this, so how come she can do this when she's with you? oh, because, you know, I often try this with Ria, and I know Ria likes that, and vice versa. And, you know, we're able to collaborate together to best support the students. So I would encourage you guys, I don't know whether you have an open door policy at your schools or your academies, but maybe even dropping an email to your head of faculty, those that are more experienced, or just anyone in your department, and say, you know, I'd love to, I'm thinking about working on effective questioning. I'm able to come in and observe you with such and such a class. And doing that, I think for myself, has really, really improved my teaching practice, and has really, really made me feel like people can come into my classroom and I'm not ashamed, like I'm not embarrassed. I don't think, oh, like I'm nervous and what's going on. It's just like we're all cool, we're all family, we're all gonna help each other out. So they are able to identify a blind spot in my teaching practice that maybe I was unable to see, which is what I think is the beauty of teaching teacher triads. So you've got three of you, maybe you come in and you say, oh, you know what, Antoinette, you often say such and such. So maybe you can think about doing this. And I'm like, oh, you know, I never noticed that before. I'm going to try and take that on board. That is a good point to make as well. All right, last point. Oh, and no, go back. Just the bold bit. Thank you. So support doesn't mean 100 resources and leaving work after 7. No, not at all. Sometimes I'm leaving work with the kids 4:05. I'm going home now because the work is done for the day. Not always, but sometimes. But I just want to really, really let, especially those that are in their formative years of teaching, so your training year, your NQT year, sweetheart, you don't have to be here till 7. You don't need to make 100 resources, because that isn't necessarily the best use of your time. But it's about finding other ways that you can also develop and support your students, because I'm telling you, we're trying to save the planet and the paper is just too much. So one way that you can do this is, Ria, could you chunk the information, should say, so as to reduce cognitive overload? Now, that could just mean you on your PowerPoint, is it just words on there? Is it just streams and streams of text on your PowerPoint? If that is the case, could you just break it up? Could you have a glossary as well? In my training year, my mentor always encouraged me to plan my own lessons. And when I finally started to grow confident, the small confidence that I had at the time, I stopped using a PowerPoint and I just used an A3 sheet. And I had a series of maybe 6 tasks each lesson that I needed students to complete. And just by having that, this was something that all students could complete. And this was a mixed ability group, so high prior attainers, low prior attainers, and SEN learners. And they were all able to know, okay, I need to do this first, then I'm going to move on to this. And for my SEN learners, I might get them to start at a different point to the other class members, but the end goal would be the same. Next question. Could you live mark? Please don't underestimate the power of your pen. Just get your pen out, whether it's blue, red, green, whatever you use to mark, whatever your policy is at your school. And just go around and have a look and see, oh, you know what? Okay, this person's getting this wrong. Let me just give them a little question to kind of prompt them and put them back in the right direction. If everybody is now getting it wrong, or there's a common misconception, I know for me, we've all got to stop. We've got to put our pens down now, and we're going to the board and we're going to do it. And I'm going to explain this again. Now, live marking is an immediate way that you can check for any misconceptions, any confusion. And I think it's really, really powerful, which means that it doesn't get to the end of the week where you mark their books and you think, oh, you know, I'm a bit demotivated because I thought my students understood this. It's you're able to counteract any confusion that they may have at that point in time, which I think is really, really effective. Next question. Traffic light books on exit. So green, amber, red. When the students leave, are you able to just tell them, listen, based on your understanding of the lesson, pop your books in the pile that you think is most applicable to you? That's something that I found really, really helpful. Of course, you need to go through all of the books, but I would start with the reds. Sometimes the reds have put themselves there because they don't have as much confidence. So you're not actually a red, you're an amber. Sometimes the amber is actually a red. Sometimes the green is a green or a red, but it gives me a clear indication of where that student thinks they are, and then what I need to do to subsequently plan a lesson that sort of rectifies any confusion that they had and any misconceptions that they had. Okay, last one, I think. Provide whole class feedback. So I don't know what that looks like in your specific subject areas, but again, I'm going to send around some examples of what I've used in English and some examples from other subject areas in my academy as well. So providing whole class feedback will mean that, let's say, for instance, they've been working on an extended piece of writing. So there are 3 targets that I've found that the class need to work on. And so having that whole class feedback means that I'm going to get on the board and I'm going to go through how to meet that target. I'll give you an example of how to do it. We're going to do it together. I'm purposefully going to get things wrong when I'm live modeling, because I want a student that isn't working on that target to be able to say, oh, miss, no, actually, you need to include this. And we're able to work together to see what needs to go into the pot to make it a good meal. Next. Yes. So again, full circle, maybe because I'm a teacher, we go back to where we started. But again, Thomas Edison, our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. Now, the best part of learning is the moment where everything clicks, the moment where you get that eureka moment, everything suddenly just makes sense. The camera focus is just perfect. And you begin to feel better, you work better, you feel stronger, you work faster, you have a sense of clarity and you feel confident. And all of this session is about giving you guys the power to empower your students. You need to encourage your students and let them know that nothing is beyond their capacity to conquer, as long as their willingness to learn is stronger than their desire to quit. And when that desire to quit is strong, that's when we step in as their cheerleaders, so to speak, to give them that push to keep on trying again, because those difficult moments can sometimes destroy the beauty of learning and their perhaps idea of what they think they're capable of learning. So I encourage it. Get upset, get angry, get frustrated, get it all out of your system, but understand that we're going to try again because you're going to get this right. So it's really important that we're building that culture where students aren't afraid to make mistakes, but will relentlessly keep on going so that they feel confident and that they're able to get to that end goal. So the most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. And this is something that, again, I am encouraging my students, but I'd like to encourage with all of you teachers that have joined in on this live stream today. We can't give up on our students, and our students will succeed. We need to keep trying, and we need to encourage them to try, because that is when they will be successful. Thank you.
Okay, wait. Can you hear me? Thank you so much. That was so good and so informative. I have even had to reflect on my own practice. When you were talking about putting loads of words on a PowerPoint, I was like, oh my gosh, is she talking about me? Because that is what I do. And so thank you for all of those tips, those strategies to use in the classroom. I'm definitely going to adapt some of the resources that I've seen. It was just so good. And I think no matter where you are at in your teaching career, it's always good to reflect on the strategies you're using in the classroom to help your SEND learners. And it's always good to just reflect on what you're doing to support them the best way they can. Specifically, I like the idea of using the PLP, so the personal learning plans, and just knowing what works for a student, not assuming what works, but them telling you what works for them. So thank you so much. So we can move into our Q&A now. So we've got quite a few questions, but I'm only going to go for about five to seven questions. Anyone who's here live in the stream, if you have any questions, please do just post a comment and we'll try and answer that question. But please do, of course, give your thanks to Antoinette because it's her leading this session. I'm just leading the Q&A. I'm not a SEND specialist, you know. That's why I left the stream, because I was going to leave it to the experts. So thank you.
Even if I don't get to answer, sorry, Ria, even if I don't get to answer all of your questions, follow me on Twitter, Miss Antoinette X. Send me a DM. I've opened my DMs for educational purposes. So please just send me any questions that you may have as well. But yeah, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. So, an interesting question that someone asked was about any suggestions for a positive SEND inclusive behavior policy. So, how could we potentially change our behavior policy to be inclusive of those with SEND needs?
So, do you know what is difficult is that something that I've noticed that has really come up recently is students at SEND that are particularly defiant have some of the students have now been labelled as having ODD, so oppositional defiance disorder. So this is something where we actually find it difficult to follow the rules of anybody that is in power, or I can't remember the exact definition, but I'm going to send that round to the person that is asking this question now. So if you find that they are persistently maybe being disruptive or presenting certain behaviours, there may be things that you need to raise within the safeguarding team. Maybe there's things that are going on behind the scenes that teachers aren't necessarily privy to. I think it'd be really, really important. Your first point of contact would be to talk to your line manager. So maybe talk to your head of department or your mentor, whoever that may be, and process your concerns. Keep like a little record of what that student has been doing so that you're able to paint a clear picture. So at your school, whether I don't know how you kind of record like behavior incidents, it's quite important that you're including that as all or everything that is going on. Just write it down, be specific. Call home and try and exhaust every avenue. And I'd say talk to your SEN team, talk to the SENCO, because hopefully your SENCO is a member of SLT and they're able to feedback this. And now's the time where we're sort of tweaking behavior policies, especially in light of COVID and that return to schools. It'd be a really, really good opportunity to open that discussion. But I'd say definitely speak to the safeguarding lead regarding any like behaviours if you think they're particularly of concern, and definitely speak to your SENCO at your school. And you know what, you probably aren't the only teacher that feels the same way. So if you open and start that conversation, I promise you it could be the start of something great.
Thank you very much. And so we had quite a few questions on how to best use teaching assistants in the classrooms, especially in secondary schools, because in primary schools, I guess it's a lot more easier to assign a teaching assistant. I'm not exactly sure the structure in primary school, but I do believe you have a teaching assistant assigned to a class, whereas in secondary school, you've got teaching assistants that work across all departments and with all different students. So how can teachers and practitioners make best use of their teaching assistants, especially in mainstream secondary schools?
Well, I'm actually doing some research on that now, and I'll be able to share some ideas with you guys. If you have a look at the Education Endowment Foundation, there's actually a section that focuses on effectively deploying your TA. Now, I've got the file. I will send this to that person, but I would say that it just depends on where your school setting. But all I can do is encourage you to develop a positive relationship with that TA. I know for myself, not everyone is blessed to have a TA in their classroom. Not everyone is blessed to have a TA that's doing or performing in the way in which you'd like them to perform. So if you do, I'm very, very happy for you. I'd say for myself, when I have had a TA, I'd always send the TA the lesson in advance so that they're with the content. Even if I don't quite get the time to send them the lesson, they'll have a breakdown of the long-term plan and short-term plan, medium-term plan, MTP, so that they know, okay, by this week we're going to be focusing on this, so that they can sort of just familiarize themselves on any like key concepts and content that I'm going to expose to the students, so they're ready. I think at the end of the lesson, I'll always have a conversation with my TA, or just send them an email and say, babe, like, what did you think? Like, did such and such understand? And they'll say, oh yeah, like it was fine. Or actually, maybe you could do X, Y, Z. And I think, okay, cool. Next lesson, I'm going to go harder and I'm going to try again. So I'd say open that line of communication between you and your TA, because even though they may not be a subject specialist in your area, they're a SEN specialist and they know what's going on, and they can have a clearer picture of that child's needs than the teacher might have. So I'd say, dude, I hope that helps.
Thank you. No, that's a really, really great answer. There was quite a lot of talk on how to kind of manage SEND students going into your PGCE year. And so I know that's a big fear of trainee teachers and people that are just about to start out. So how did you manage that, and what tips would you give, even if you just give 2 or 3?
Did I manage?
Well, I mean, you're the expert now, so even if you didn't manage, you knew what you said.
I kept banging on today about students need to make mistakes. Baby, in your PGC, girl, boy, you better make those mistakes. Get it wrong. Get it wrong. Get it wrong. Let that be your target. Work on that your next lesson. The strategies that you might use. So you might use images with one child, and you might have a glossary for one child, and then it doesn't work for another child, or it works and you think, yeah, like they're getting it, and then suddenly it doesn't work anymore, and you need to try again, and you need to try different things. So have a look at I don't know if they're called student information sheets, but any of the information that your school has on SEN learners and the strategies, your SENCO should be giving you strategies on how to support them. Have a look, try and have a conversation with the teacher who taught that group last. They might be able to give you some tips as well, and talk to your head of department, because they might already have a bank of resources. Don't worry, all I can do is encourage you to try different things. When I was in my training year, I was doing carousel activities and it was fun. And I think sometimes you get a bit dry, and I missed having that sort of explorative learning that I used to. And I'm definitely going to try and do that post lockdown, 2-meter distance, but definitely going to try and employ that in my teaching practice. But have a look at the strategies that are already there. Talk to your head of department with any of your concerns, and I'm sure they'll be able to alleviate your worries.
Yeah. And there was a question about how to access these things, but I do know that if you don't want to go to your SENCO, you should have access to a child's profile of needs based on whether you use Sims. I know that where I was based before, we used Bromcom. So you might, it just depends, but it should be accessible through those routes. So once you have access to those registers, you should be able to access your child's SEN needs if they have that. And that's something that you should have accessed from the beginning of the year. I know some people don't even look at the profile of need, and then they get to January and they're like, oh, that child has autism. Oh my God. And then you're like, well, yeah, they do. And then it's like, oh my gosh. That happened to me. I had a child and I was teaching her for 3 months. And then in the 3rd month, she was like, Miss, I can only really read off of yellow paper. And I said, 3 months have gone by and you've not said anything to me. And I felt bad because I hadn't actually looked at her PLP, but you always make those mistakes, and it's just about rectifying those mistakes and making sure the child feels as comfortable. So yeah, you really do have to.
I'm gonna send I'll have to like change it, but I'm gonna go into work tomorrow, I think. Tomorrow, girl, Saturday next week. And I've got some, I've annotated my seating plans with like strategies that work for specific students. So maybe like just giving you some tips that aren't necessarily on the shared area or anything like that, but I show you what I do with my seating plan when I have a new class.
Right.
I'll send that round to whoever needs that, so they have an idea of yeah.
Perfect. We'll do 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Someone said, how long do you keep these strategies in place without allowing a child to become too reliant on them?
Mm. I think I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question because I want you as the expert in that room. When you feel like, when you see the progress that that child is making, that's when the support, I'd say, begins to lessen. That's when you begin to reduce the support. But then you might see, oh, like I've taken a bit too much away. The student isn't quite where I think they should be. And that's when we would help them. I think it's there isn't necessarily a specific time frame, but I'd say that at the end of each topic, just see like at the beginning, let's say from September to October, see the progress that they make. When you're doing your weekly recall quizzes or whatever it is to assess their prior learning, see how much they learn, see how much they feel familiar with. And then when you introduce a new concept, see whether they're able to use the skills that you taught them previously and apply that to the new content. Because that is all it is. It's about using the skills that you've given them and applying it to new content. Because everything we're teaching them, it might be new topics, but it's the same skills that they need to apply, and they need to just know when to apply those skills. And we
Right.
give the tools to do that. And then in time, you'll see for yourself. Maybe even some days, just say, you know what, I'm not gonna have that. I'm not gonna make that resource. I'm just gonna have sentence stems on the board. You'll see. They'll use the sentence stems. They'll
Mm,
use the sentence stems. So just try not to give them too much, so that they don't rely on you or your TA as a crutch, because you want them to be able to go from novice to expert.
right. Excellent. What advice can you give to someone starting the NA Senko course and Senko position in September? I know you are yourself a deputy Senko, so what advice can you give to those who are about to start that journey?
Well, whoever this person is, please send me an email. Maybe you've got advice that you can give me too, because girl, iron sharpens iron. What can I say? What advice? Just know, babes, whoever you are, you were chosen. You were chosen for a reason. You were chosen because they saw something in you. They
Mm,
saw that your quality of teaching and the way that you support your SEN learners is outstanding. That's number one. So just don't ever feel like you weren't chosen for that reason. The quality of your teaching speaks volumes, which is why they think that you're the person that is best suited for that role.
mhm,
Understand that everyone is going to help you. Everyone will help you. The TAs will help you. I don't know if you're going to have a Senko there at the time, but the assistant principal link or the SLT link to send is going to help you. Please don't feel that you're by yourself. There will be like your TAs, like there's stuff that the Senko does, and you kind of delegate, and there are things that the TAs do that I don't
mhm,
even know how to do, because they've been doing it for years. So they know how to do year six transition XYZ lucid tests and X, like, they know how to do it. So ask them and they'll be there to support you. And just make sure that you email your tutor for your Nosenko course, because everything is online. And I don't know, for me, I like asking questions. So it can be quite challenging, I'd say. But
yeah.
get your tutor's email so that you can just get all the information that you need and you can plan ahead of time. So with my course, I'm at uni once a month, so one Wednesday a month, and I always know that on a specific day I'm gonna prepare myself for that. And you need to also be writing essays. You need to collate a folder that I have not been collating, so I can't even tell you about how to be organized. But just try and get your organization on point, because you'll be doing that and you don't want the quality of your teaching to suffer either. So just plan the term ahead and ask questions, and I promise you everyone is going to be there to help you.
Right. Thank you so much for the answer. And last question, just in light of COVID, someone asked, how do you support ASD students teaching them online? So teaching students with SEN needs online through Zoom, through Microsoft Teams, whatever it may be, even if you're just sending resources, how do you think we could do that effectively, especially if we, God forbid, second wave, I mean, we know it's coming. How do we prepare ourselves to best support our SEN learners through online teaching?
Boy, well, I'm not too sure if I alluded to this earlier, but I'd say that the SEND engagement during lockdown has been, the numbers were interesting at times. Students are accessing work. Students will always access work that they think they can do. Please don't feel like students work because they don't like you. They're doing the work that they know they can do by themselves. So if they feel like they can't do your work, then it's on you. Like, what are you presenting to them? Why can they not do this by themselves? Your PowerPoints that maybe you set for the students, I don't even know because I am not tech savvy. Ask Ria, I'm not tech savvy. Did you know that you can do a voice recording over your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I do it. I did it with my year 12.
That's
My
rhetorical.
iPad.
I'm asking the question. Did you know that you could do a voice recording over your PowerPoint? When I found that out, it's gone clear. I was reading the things out and I was, applying proper sense stress on particular words that I know they find a bit more challenging. On Microsoft Teams, my TAs were supporting specific students. So they would have like one-on-ones. I don't know if that's something that is like available at your school, but encouraging maybe there to be some sort of one-on-one with the TAs so that they're able to support the students. So one of my TAs was actually in the Teams thing. I don't know what the terms are, in the Teams group. And what else? So we've got the voice recording. Just keep assessing their knowledge. You can do like quizzes on Teams too to see each week, like how much are they getting, what is the percentage, and then you're able to sort of begin to work on the misconceptions and the things that they find challenging. Really, really important. I'd say and call home. When you call home, you speak to the parents and they might say to you, maybe that student's not doing the work because the internet, maybe they're sharing a device. Like there can be loads of reasons as to why they're not accessing your work. But I just say try your best to ensure that it is heavily scaffolded and also includes a bit of challenge, but just super clear layout. And yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, Antoinette, I just want you to let people know where they can find you, where they can get in contact with you. We're going to discuss about how to best send out resources, but where can people find you? How can they get in contact with you if they need to?
So my Twitter is Miss Antoinette X. I feel like I'm on YouTube.
But you are on YouTube. You are live on YouTube. So yeah.
My channel. Sorry. Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter, Miss Antoinette X. I'm always tweeting something. So you can ask me any questions on there. I promise I don't bite. Like literally, I want to help everyone. There's room for everyone to win. Like, guys, I just want to thank Ria for this opportunity as well. And I wish I had this when I was training, because in these streets, it is hard. It is hard to go into a profession where you don't know what you're doing and you can feel so alone. And I really, really just want to keep building a community where teachers online, whether we know each other or not, can just keep sharpening one another. So send me an email, send me a DM, and I'll put my email there as well. And you can just ask me any questions. I'll send you any resources that you might need to support you. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Just let me know beforehand. But on Twitter is the best place for you to ask me any questions. And I'm interested in developing my SEN practice and delivering additional SEN workshops. So if you have any suggestions on any other SEN workshops that you'd be interested in, that you'd like me to specifically focus on, so whether that be ASD or blah, 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 please let me know. And I can even direct you to people that are specialists in that area too. So follow my Twitter, I'll follow back, and just drop me a DM if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. And so thank you, guys. You'll be able to watch this back. It will be available on Black Teachers Connect YouTube channel. As ever, follow Black Teachers Connect on Instagram and Twitter. Keep up with us. Our NQT and PGCE webinar for primary is coming. So get yourself excited. Please do explain and tell other people that you know. Thank you guys for joining. I'm about to end this broadcast right now. Have a great evening, wonderful afternoon in the rain because the sun is gone. So enjoy yourself. Take care. Stay safe.